Hey everyone working in dogs. This is a quick tutorial on how to export your Substance Painter mesh and textures into Unreal Engine 4. So you did all your work, you did all your texturing and all your different passes on your object, and you're finally happy with what you have. So today I'm going to be importing the textures for my construction barrier, but this will work for any object that you do. So once you're happy, and always make sure to double check and make sure there are any weird spots or anything, we're going to go over to the top left where it says File. We're going to go down this drop down menu and we're going to go to where it says Export Textures, second from the bottom. It's going to open up an export document window, and within this, we're going to want to change a couple of things. First off, the configuration is usually set to whatever your project is by default. Now, I set mine to Unreal Engine 4, but I think a lot of people will commonly set it to PBR. Which is fine. You can do that when you open up a project, but make sure that when we're exporting it, we set it to Unreal Engine 4. This is going to combine some textures into one, and it'll allow us to have an easier time getting it into the engine, and it will also cut out some things that the engine will already calculate for us that isn't necessary. So we're going to choose Unreal Engine 4 PAT, not Unreal Engine 4 SSS. And then over here on the right, we're going to pick PNG for our, this is going to choose the format of our actual texture sheets. And then make sure we're also choosing 16-bit color. We'll have more color definition and more detail. By default, it's set to 8-bit. Over where it says Common Patty, make sure it's under Dilation Infinite, and then we don't need to change anything else. And then double check under here, under your texture sets, to that we have all of our different passes here: our base color, our occlusion, roughness, and metallic, our normal, and our emissive. And then once you're done, once you check for all that, then hit export. Now I'm already exported it, so I'm not going to do that here. When you do hit export, it'll allow you to click a button that shows you to where the folder we're exported to. If you miss that, it will always be under, you can go under this way, which is Documents, Algorithmic, Substance Painter, Export, and then by default, it'll have your three texture sheets laid out right here. And you know it was a good export when you see these three. We have our base color, our normal, and our occlusion, roughness, metallic. Now, I recommend making a folder because by default, it just has these three textures laid out and no folder. I'd make a folder and then put all three of them in there. And then when we go over to the engine, we can do it in an easy way. So this is where I have it already imported here, but if we're going to be re-importing it, all you have to do, misclick, all you have to do is take that folder and literally drag it on into here. And this will add the folder and all of the texture sheets in there. I'm not going to do this since I've already did that. Once you have it in there, excuse the material for right now, but it'll look like these three. And then that's how you know you had a good import, is when you have all three of these. One other thing we need to do before we start making these textures into a material is that going into our occlusion, roughness, and metallic texture, we need to make sure that sRGB is checked off. Normally this is checked on, but we don't want it. Make sure that it's uncheck marked. All right, now once we're done with that, we're ready to create our new material. So in the engine, you can right click and then click material and then type out your material. I'm going to go to the one that I already made earlier. So when you get it by default, it's going to just look something like this. It'll just have this main material node here, but we're going to need to get our texture sheets in there. So you can easily just select all three, click and drag them in there. Then it'll add all of these texture sheets for us, but they won't have any of these connections at the start. But connecting them to these pins is pretty easy. If your object that you're working with is an opaque normal object, such as a construction sign or a barrier, for example, we won't need to change anything in here. By default, the material node is set to a surface opaque default lit type, which is exactly what we want. So we don't need to change anything. And we don't need to check mark anything over here. We don't need to make sure it's two-sided or anything because we already made sure of that in Substance. So over here, with our base color, we're going to want to connect the RGB node to our base color because this is our base color texture. Next, our normal map, we're going to be taking the RGB node and putting that into our normal map node of our main material node. And then the most tricky one is our occlusion roughness metallic pass texture node. And where this one, we have 3 linear values that we're going to be plugging into the main material node. As you can see in our main textures, there are a couple of different colors in here, but each linear value, our occlusion, roughness, and our metallic, each have their own linear value. So in this order, we want to make sure that our red channel is going to our ambient occlusion main node. Our green channel is going to our roughness main material channel. And lastly, our blue channel is going to our metallic material channel. Then you're going to want to make sure that you hit save and hit apply. And then after that, we now have our material created, but it's not going to be applied to our object yet. So there's 2 ways that you can apply to an object. I'll show the easiest way is that when you click on an object, it'll have its own material slot here. And then you can simply type in the name of the material that you made and you can find it. But this will only apply to this specific instance of our static mesh. If we're going to be having the same one, it probably would make more sense to apply to all of them. So what you can do then instead is opening up our static mesh object in here. We can go over to our material slots here and type it in here. Again, works the same way. Apply it here, then hit save, and now all our construction barriers will have the same material. So now instead of adding it to each one, all of them will have the same one. And then this should be the final result, is that we have our mesh and our texture applied to it that we made in Substance. Again, always double check that to make sure your UVs are lined up, but it should look correct. And that's it.